Today's video is in response to a question from one of the members of our congregation who asked, why doesn't the Kaddish mention death? After all, we recite it when we remember the loss of someone in years past or a recent loss. It's a great question, and it has to do with the fact that originally the Kaddish was not written as a prayer of memory or a prayer of mourning. It was originally used, starting in around the 1st century, as a prayer to recite at the end of a study session. A scholar might give a great discourse or a lecture. There could be a good study session with other scholars, and at the end of it, they would stand and they would offer praise to God. And Kaddish is, in essence, a praise of God. Yit gadal v'yit Kaddish shemei rabbah. May God's great name be made great and hallowed and exalted. Over time, when a scholar died, his students and colleagues would remember him and mourn him by reciting the Kaddish, which after all they used all the time at the end of study sessions. So it first began to be used to remember a scholar. And then over time, it trickled out to all people so that when anyone died, or when it was a yortzeit, the anniversary of someone's death, we would recite that Kaddish prayer. And then as we fast forward through Jewish history to the Crusades and the difficult periods of medieval Jewish history when Jews were persecuted and killed, synagogue goers would recite the Kaddish as part of the synagogue service, which of course is the practice that we have now. So again, the reason Kaddish itself does not mention death is because it was never written for that purpose. It just began to be used over time, gradually, for that purpose until we have the practice that we have today. There is, however, a version of Kaddish called the burial Kaddish, which does mention death and is traditionally recited at the gravesite. There is a beautiful interpretation of the meaning of the words of Kaddish. Why, after all, at a time of pain and loss, are we being asked to essentially talk about how great God is? At a time of loss, we may not actually be thinking that because we're so bereaved, and we may even be upset with God. And there's a beautiful legend or tradition that says that when any human being dies, it's a loss and a suffering for God, that God is diminished. So in essence, we recite Kaddish according to this understanding to, in a way, console God. To say that, God, we know that you are diminished, you are in pain at this loss, and so we're saying, Yit gadal v'yit Kaddish shemei rabbah. May you become great, may you become holy, and your great name be sanctified. But ultimately, I think the power of Kaddish lies not so much in what the words say, but in how we say them. One of my teachers once said that Kaddish really is a mantra. It's the rhythm of the texts that really gives it its power. Yit gadal v'yit Kaddish shemei rabbah. We say that prayer in that rhythm, surrounded by our community, surrounded by our friends and loved ones, and we get caught up in the spirituality of the moment. It moves our soul. It gets us out of our rational minds and gets us, as it were, into our non-rational spiritual minds when we are caught up in the power of community and in the power of reciting a prayer that we Jews have recited for centuries at just such a time as this. If you have a question about Judaism, please do not hesitate to let us know. We would be delighted to answer it.